It's so great to be here in a room so full with other growth marketers here, so this is awesome. What I'm going to talk about today is data-driven design. Now, specifically, I'm going to be talking mostly about digital design, so this is going to be stuff like websites, landing pages, emails, ads, this sort of stuff. And I actually think that design is probably the most misunderstood, and maybe the most underrated growth lever for your business, because if you look at your marketing plan, it's really the one thing where literally every single person in your company has an opinion on design, right? And almost no one actually knows what they're talking about. So if you think about how design decisions usually get made, it usually looks a little something like this. I don't know if you can read this, but it's basically some stakeholders around a room, right, in a meeting, saying things like, oh, I don't like this color, can we make this blue? What about the layout? Let's come up with a compromise. And it's basically designed by committee. So the problem with this, obviously, there's a few of them. One, the most important stakeholder is not in that meeting usually, which is the user. Second, this is really prone to personal biases. It's really prone to groupthink. It's prone to hippos, right? Your highest paid person's opinions coming up. And the result is that basically, most design decisions aren't made in an optimal way. Lots of different examples of that. So HubSpot did a survey a little while ago of marketers asking them how happy they are with their last redesign. And there was about 152 people that actually responded. A third of marketers said, I wasn't happy with my last redesign. This was for websites. If you're more data-driven, more data-focused, like probably a lot of people in this room, this is actually a little bit worse. So we can look at the data from, for example, aggregate data from A/B tests. And we can see that 70% of the time, when you make a change to your website, thinking that you're making it better or hoping that you're making it better, you fail to deliver a statistically significant conversion uplift, right? So a lot of times, people are making changes, redesigning things, not actually getting any benefit out of it. In some cases, even kind of arriving on these web design nightmares that you hear about all the time, sort of redesign disaster stories like Marks and Spencer's. This is the one that always comes up for me, the first thing that comes to mind, because they redesigned their website. This is one of the biggest retail brands in the UK for people that don't know. They redesigned their website. It cost about 150 million pounds. I don't know what that is in euros. I think it's, 180 million euros to redesign. It took them 2 years. And they launched it and immediately saw an 8% drop in sales for at least online sales. So that's kind of like absolute worst case scenario, right? This is a huge publicly traded company. Imagine how the shareholders felt about that, and senior leadership when you have to explain to shareholders that actually we lost all this money because we redesigned our website. This is not actually all that uncommon either. So there are a lot of other stories. Target is kind of another famous one where they actually went through this 2 or 3 times over the span of a few years before they finally got closer to getting it right. So it's not all bad though. So the one kind of really nice thing is that in recent years, user research and user testing has become a lot more available and accessible, easy to use. But also, I would say another really interesting kind of advance in this field is machine learning and computer vision being applied to this. So what you can do today with machine learning to understand really how specific design characteristics affect user behavior and affect their perception of your websites, ads, landing pages, etc., is really amazing, the advances in the last few years. So my team at EyeQuant has really been working hard on this, trying to figure out what type of designs actually lead to the things that you want, the outcome that you want. Things like increased engagement from users, increased conversion rates, increased sales. And along the way, try and understand at a much more granular level really how certain types of design or design decisions might usually affect the people that are going to see those designs. And I can tell you kind of this bit of a spoiler alert, but the one thing we found so far that is kind of like the overarching theme is that the simpler and the less cluttered your design is, the better it usually works. And we're going to see a little bit of evidence on that in a few minutes here, but that's the main takeaway, I think, from our research so far. However, the problem is that's pretty easy to get behind as sort of a mission statement, as a mantra. Even the people crowded around that room in the comic earlier would probably agree with this. But the question is, if you're looking at a particular design, and I've just picked the Amazon homepage, and I ask, well, do you think this design is too cluttered? It's really, really hard to answer that question because the people who you're going to ask are obviously going to all be using different reference points, right? Is it too cluttered? Well, cluttered how and compared to what? So what I want to do is I'm going to show you an example of how we collect this type of data on clutter for machine learning. And we're going to do it in kind of well, we're going to have our own little experiment here with the crowd. So what I'm going to do is instead of asking you, hey, what do you think of the Amazon homepage? I'm going to show you two designs, right, side by side. Hopefully it's going to be hard for the people in the back to see this, so I hope it's going to work. I'm going to show you two designs, and I'm going to ask you, which of the two, right or left, do you think is most cluttered, right? And I want you to answer this just based on gut feel. No thinking. Don't try and kind of over-rationalize it. Just gut feel, which one do you think is more cluttered, left or right, and then we'll do kind of a show of hands and see, okay? So this is going to be a pair. First pair, here they are. Which one of these two designs do you think is more cluttered, right? Who says the one on the left is more cluttered? Yeah, you're left, yeah. Okay, and who thinks it's the one on the right is more cluttered? Okay, a bunch of hands go up. Makes sense. So actually, this almost doesn't do it justice. That's Ling's Cars. Does anyone know Ling's Cars? It's actually a really, really successful car rental and car sales website that basically has built their brand around just having like a totally crazy website. So there's actually like a lot of animation, and I think the owner of the business is singing in the background. Okay, so we've done sort of what we call a forced choice test here, right? Instead of saying, do you think Amazon is cluttered, I've asked, okay, is it cluttered compared to this, right? This other one. Now we'll try it again with a different design. Which of these two designs do you think is more cluttered? Again, just gut feel. We're going to do show of hands again. Who thinks the design on the left, that's the Amazon one, is the more cluttered one of these two? Yeah, okay, lots of hands go up. Who thinks that the one on the right is the more cluttered one? This one's also easy, right? Not many hands go up. Okay, let's try this one now. It's a little bit closer. Who thinks the one on the left is more cluttered? And who thinks, oh, there we go, a few more hands. And who thinks the one on the right? Okay, so that's Walmart, and now the crowd has spoken. Walmart has a more cluttered homepage than Amazon. Well, once we do this sort of stuff, and you imagine repeating this with many, many, many people with many, many different designs, patterns start to emerge, and we start to see which types of designs get voted as the cleaner designs, which ones get voted as the more cluttered designs, and we can use that data for some really interesting stuff with machine learning. So an example of that, how we do it at EyeQuant, is basically taking that data and looking at the actual underlying design and trying to find different features or characteristics about the design that might actually have some impact on whether or not people think it's clean or cluttered, right? So these are all feature maps. They kind of look like heat maps, and they're actually showing basically values for different features across the image. So for example, some of these might represent, you know, which parts of the design have the highest contrast levels or saturation levels, or there's some edge detection stuff in there. Lots of different things that you can basically extract out of an image algorithmically and use as potential predictors for what types of designs are considered clean, which ones are considered cluttered. And what we actually did with this is we used it to build a predictive algorithm that will take any new design you give it, and within 5 or 10 seconds, give it a rating. And it's a 0 to 100 score, where 0 means the design is really, really cluttered, right? So we call it a visual clarity score. Low scores, very cluttered, busy designs. High scores, very clean, very clear designs. And what that enables us to do is some really cool stuff. Because what we saw is that this is surprisingly accurate compared to human studies. So when we look at the results from a 200-person study versus this, you know, quick algorithm, it's about 90% as good. So taking that, we can actually do some really interesting research. So for example, we did this little experiment in the room with these 4 designs. We can actually see, well, how does the algorithm see it, right? What does it think? So it also agreed with the room. We can see that it lines up pretty closely with your guys' opinions. Google has the cleanest design, then Amazon, then Walmart, and then Ling's Cars, which I was actually a bit disappointed about this because Ling's Cars, they changed their design recently. Before it was a 0, and it's the only 0 I've ever seen, which is, yeah, it's a shame, but a 2 is still, very, very, very extreme. So I mentioned a little earlier, though, that what we found is that clean designs, right, simple, uncluttered designs are the ones that work the best. Having the ability to build scores like this is how we can test that sort of statement, right? So one thing that we did recently is we actually used Alexa to take a sample of 300 very popular websites from Alexa's kind of top sites categories. So we had 300 sites from, I think, 8 different categories, from like more traditional e-commerce stuff like clothing and shoes through to financial services, travel, booking, this sort of stuff. And we calculated the correlation between the bounce rates for those websites and the clarity score for those websites according to this algorithm. And here are the results. So on this graph, again, sorry for the people in the back, I'm seeing some squinting. There's basically a bunch of dots that represent each of the 300 websites. And you can see the bounce rate for that website and the clarity score from the algorithm as well. And you can see this kind of trend line here showing that generally, the cleaner your design is, the lower your bounce rate is, which means that basically the cleaner design tends to garner more engagement. And I think that just goes to show that design really does have an impact on user behavior beyond kind of the stuff that people expect, right? A lot of people, I think, still consider design to be more of an aesthetic thing or a branding thing, but really it's a growth thing. This is probably not super surprising by itself, that cleaner designs perform better. For me, the part that was really interesting is actually just how strong the relationship was, because when we look at the data across all categories, basically what it said is that 1/3 of the variance in bounce rates could be explained by the website's clarity score, which is pretty crazy. So put that in less statistical terms. In a sense, it's basically like 1/3 of the decision to bounce or not once you're on a website comes down to whether or not the design is too cluttered, which for me is a surprising result that's much stronger than I expected to see. So I want to make sure you can actually sort of use this with your own websites, apps, ads, emails, landing pages. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the factors that actually drive people's perception of clutter, right? Because that's what we're finding out when we do the machine learning. And I found a really interesting example for this with a website called Paula's Choice, and it's a skincare brand. And I think usually the easiest way to say, to see which types of designs get rated higher and not is to really compare. And so I noticed with Paula's Choice that I think they're probably going through a redesign now and maybe rolling it out slowly market by market, because their website in the US is very, very different right now from their website in Germany. And these are 2 product detail pages for each site. And one of them scores a 26 with this predictive algorithm. One of them scores an 85. So here we can actually kind of, for the exact same product, get a feeling for what the differences are, so we can sort of understand how do you improve your score, how do you make your design feel less cluttered. Let's look first at the one that was rated as more cluttered. You'll notice here, the first thing probably that a lot of you see is that there's a ton of text. If there's one thing that we found to be a absolute kind of no-no in terms of preventing this feeling people have of, oh no, that's so cluttered, it's the wall of text, right? You don't want to have that on your website anywhere if possible. People are very, very critical of text-heavy websites. Of course, there are always exceptions, but that's the pattern. And you'll notice actually with this version of this product detail page, not only is there a ton of text, but they've actually almost done everything they can to make that text that's there feel more cluttered than, or as cluttered as possible. For example, it's got very bold typeface, right? It's also got very sharp contrasts in the colors that they use. There's a lot of, black on white everywhere, right? It's basically maximum contrast. And the images are, I would say, kind of medium sized. You'll see in a second how that compares with the other design. If you look, though, at the one that scores much higher, you see that really it's just the essential text that they're showing, right? It's the stuff you need at that exact moment in time. And that's easier said than done because you have to be able to figure out with your users what content is really important. But you can see there's not that kind of massive wall of text. And with the text that is there, they've done a much better job of making it not overwhelming because they've got much more padding, right? And they've also got a more understated typeface. So it's a thinner, lighter font, but still readable. Looking at the contrasts across the design is very interesting because instead of having a lot of sharp black and white contrasts, which generally draw the eye. Now, it's a little bit tricky because if you have a lot of those sharp contrasts, your eye will want to go in lots of different directions, right? So with this version, they actually did a better job here of the things that are really high contrast on the page are the things that are actually really important. Other than that, they use a much softer, for example, dark gray on light gray, blue on light gray, right? Much less kind of heavy contrast and luminance. And you'll notice the image is much, much bigger as well, which is interesting because what we saw pretty consistently through our research is that people are much more forgiving of images than of text and other elements. So don't be too afraid to have large imagery as long as it itself doesn't have too many really harsh contrasts or text. So I don't actually know if this design improved conversion rates for Paula's Choice because I literally just found it on the internet last week. But I did want to give you a couple of examples of cases where companies have actually used this exact approach with the score to get better results. And the first one that comes to mind for me is British Gas. And they actually used this score that we built as a way to guide a redesign process for their landing page templates. And basically, you can see on the left side, that's the older version. On the right side, that's the newer one. They've removed a lot of duplicate content. They've removed as much text as possible that wasn't absolutely necessary for users at that time. And they've improved the score from a 48 to a 72. This led to a 50% increase in actual form fills on this landing page. This is for boilers too, so it's a very high-ticket item. Very big business impact just by improving the design, just by decluttering the design. Similar case here with Epson. This is on the left. This is kind of self-explanatory, right? On the left, this is a category page, and they were actually looking to improve their category pages in general. This version on the left is very, very, very cluttered. They managed to go from a 10 to a 78, again, sort of using this score as a guide. And basically what they did is just find ways to display the products in a different way so that there are not too many on the screen at one point in time. They went from a 10 to a 78 and actually increased conversion by about 20% as well. So a really cool result. I want to leave lots of time for questions here. So the last thing I'll say is that I think this is really just the beginning of the type of insights that machine learning can give us into how people will react to design. I've seen algorithms that predict whether a design is exciting or not. I've seen algorithms that predict where people are going to look on a screen. And I think this is really a field that's going to expand a lot over the coming years. And we're going to learn lots of other interesting things about the patterns in what types of design actually tends to work and not. Thanks. We got time for questions, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Any questions? Yeah.
How flexible is your scoring model? I mean, a well-performed website in Germany would not really work in Asia, so the performance is not the same, maybe.
It's a loaded question because there's a lot more to that than I think just how cluttered the design is. But you're right. If you look at different country markets, you tend to see differences in terms of, I would almost call it clutter tolerance, right? Because if you look in websites in China, tend to be much, much more cluttered than websites in, I don't know, Sweden, for example, right? And I don't think that changes the way that the scoring works, but rather the interpretation of it, right? The threshold that you say, you know, what is cluttered and what is not. When our customers actually use this to optimize designs, it's actually a process that starts with benchmarking. So figuring out what is a normal score in our market for this type of page and using that as a starting point. So it's not a universal thing where under 50 is bad, over 50 is good or anything like that. It's much more contextualized.
Thanks for a great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, I think, I mean, the applicability is clear for a very
Mm.
e-commerce driven, etc. I'm wondering whether you address or you're planning on it to address like kind of more brand, more conceptual kind of concept representations of things that kind of like need to keep a kind of emotional bond or
Yeah.
more like an emotional level, not just like
Yeah.
pragmatic, what's going to lead to the next click and the next conversion.
Yeah.
Whether you have something to address that.
It's a really good question. So one of the things that we've been working on is a little bit more work trying to predict how certain visual elements will affect people emotionally, and that started with a similar score that actually will rate, just on a very basic scale, whether the design is likely to be perceived as more exciting or more calming, or in kind of an extreme scenario, potentially even boring. I think what we'd like to do in the future is to be able to look at a broader spectrum of emotions and then be able to do some sort of predictive analysis and say, okay, on this new design, this is the kind of emotion that it's likely to elicit. We're not quite at that stage yet.
Do you think that it's going to go, I mean, it's probably the answer is somewhere in the middle, but do you think when it's going to go to the point that like design is more AI generated?
That's a really interesting question. I think not. When people think about AI, when people think about automation, they sort of tend to imagine, human-like robots that replace us, and eventually we become servants to the robot overlords. I think the future of this is a little bit more like spell check, right? If you look at writing, spell check is a tool that every single person uses to get feedback on how they're doing, right? Did they spell something wrong? Did they make a grammatical mistake? I think the future of design is something similar. I don't think that AI will, and maybe it gets there at some point, but I don't think in the next 5 years that AI is going to replace the kind of creative component used. At best, it might be able to just sort of replicate stuff that's worked before. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for sharing everything. And I have a question. This is just regarding websites,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what would be interesting for me is how can we apply that concept on mobile sites?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so actually, for the examples I showed here, this is all just desktop web, but the same score exists for mobile. So we already do that, and I think with mobile it's a little bit different in that the amount of space you have to work with is so much smaller, right? So I would say the decluttering aspect is almost more important with mobile than it is for desktop, and basically just figuring out, are people going to be overwhelmed when they first land here, especially things like mobile landing pages. I think that's an especially interesting application of this sort of approach.
So you would say also decluttering, even if it means more scrolling on a tablet or iPhone,
Yeah, I would say so. So I mean, you always have to make decisions, right? Like about what content is important enough that needs to be front and center, and which content is sort of secondary that people are going to, want to find out afterwards. And it's tricky because an AI won't tell you which content is important or not, at least not yet. So there's still sort of a lot of understanding users that needs to go into that before you can start to use, just this sort of design-focused insight into what will go above the fold and what won't. Yeah. Yeah. So exploration in the sense that, like on our development side almost. Yeah. Absolutely. So one of the interesting things that we always have to be doing is looking to collect more data, right, that we can use. But I think the number one thing that's most interesting is all of the advances in machine learning right now that we can apply. So for example, moving towards more deep learning, right, to discover new design features that we hadn't defined before, right? That sort of thing, I think, is a really interesting area. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So, and yeah, you're totally right. So that's why we have to basically kind of constantly evolve that, yeah. Any more? Oh, yeah.
How generalizable or proven is the aspect of contrast? Because I'm a little bit skeptical about the readability with low contrast.
Oh, yeah. This is a favorite topic of mine, so it might be one to talk about afterwards. But specifically, the contrast I meant there was luminance contrast, basically the difference in brightness between something in the foreground and the background. And it's super, super important for readability. It's super important for visibility as well. So higher luminance contrast means people are more likely to look there. But the thing is, if every single thing on your page has like maximum level luminance contrast, the visual hierarchy effect is kind of ruined because everything's max contrast. And then secondly, that's sort of what causes a feeling of overload, right? It's the cognitive load that's created there. But I actually think that, you know, contrast is normally a very positive thing, right? It's something you use to guide attention to the most important parts of the page. Yeah. Was there one more here? No? Okay. Cool. I think that's it. Great. Thanks, guys.